This is the plane which the world believes is state-of-the-art technology. But it's not. Somewhere in secret, its replacement may already be flying, leaving unexplained traces in the night sky.
You get a light up there in the sky, and light could be caused by a lot of different things, and you have 10 different observers all looking at that light. Each of those 10 observers is going to see something else. Someone will see God, someone will see Jesus, someone will see a UFO, others will see conspiracies.
Amid this uncertainty, people are left to speculate and wonder.
We're being visited by extraterrestrial beings. We're possibly confronting beings from maybe another dimension, perhaps our own future. We really don't know, and that's the beauty of it.
We're dealing with technologies that are 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. Not what you can think or what we're doing today, but what you can just visualize in your mind. 50 years beyond that, and they're working on it.
This is the story of a journey along the frontier between what is real and what is imagined. At its heart is the secret defense establishment of the richest nation on Earth. I'm Nick Cook. I'm the aviation editor of Jane's Defence Weekly, a trade publication that reports on the inner workings of the defence business. Over recent years, it's been impossible for me to ignore this kind of barrage of publicity we've been hearing about unidentified flying objects or UFOs. So I've decided to embark on a journey to see if I can get to the core of what may or may not be going on. Now, the only real clue I have, given that most of the reports of UFOs, or at least a lot of them, come from America, is this document here, which is the annually published list of defense spending put out by the Pentagon. Inside this document is every single conceivable item of military equipment that America is likely to buy for its armed forces. But if you add up all the line items inside this budget book, and you subtract their total from the annual published total of $250 billion that the Pentagon reports to Congress, you find that there's a mismatch of about $30 billion. Now, this is what we call the black budget, or America's billion-dollar secret, which is reserved for deeply classified programs. Now, I'm wondering whether inside this classified pot of money there may be some relationship between, say, deeply classified aircraft, which is something I know about, and what people commonly report as unidentified flying objects. So over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to be crisscrossing America, talking to people, visiting facilities, to see whether I can find the truth. There are two worlds of defense, a white world you can see and a black world you can't.
Gentlemen, before you get too far away, how about a big round of applause for Thunderbird number 8, one of the best narrators.
Aerospace exhibitions are part of the white world, but behind them lies a realm of secrecy and super technology, way beyond anything they put on show.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Nick.
How you doing?
Fine. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Where is it again? Over.
Hi. Hello. Nick Cook.
The white world is an interesting enough place, but it's the hidden part, the black world, that interests me. At its center, away from all this glitz and show, is a mysterious airbase called Area 51, a place that has become a mecca for UFO watchers and serious defense analysts alike. Area 51 would be my ultimate destination, but getting there would turn out to be a journey as much through the mind as on the road. Well, I've reached Fort Worth. The reason I'm here is because a while back I was interviewing a guy called Bob Widmer. Now it transpires that 40 odd years ago, Bob Widmer, as the head of design at what was then General Dynamics Convair, was working on a program, very, very secret program called FISH, sometimes known as Kingfish. And this was a requirement that the CIA needed for a very fast-flying spy plane. And he competed against a different company at the time. Now, the staggering point to me in this story is that Bob Widmer's design lost the competition for this CIA spy plane. But today, that is some 45 years on from when he was designing it, it's still classified.
We had a program called the Super Hustler. The CIA came here and visited me one day. And they said, wasn't there something I could do with this technology? So we tried to come up with an airplane that was as near as possible to a saucer.
And did you?
And we did.
Where is it?
We shaped it. Well, we shaped this, that's this fish.
That's the fish. So the
Sure.
fish looked like a saucer.
Well, not completely. I told you we used the saucer as a start. So the front, you see,
Looks.
and then we took the back and we notched. We had to take it and a piece of it, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't. It was as close as we could get. It was always the ideal that we used. We can't do any better than we can with a treated saucer. That was sort of the goal that we used.
This is the plane that won the competition, the Lockheed-built Blackbird. For years, its performance, even at times its existence, was kept totally secret. But bit by bit, the data began to leak out, that it was the fastest, highest flying plane ever built, used for top secret reconnaissance missions all over the world. It's a classic example of a black program gradually turning white. To find out more about FISH, Bob Widmer's design, I went first to the CIA, but even 40 years on it was still classified. So I asked Bob instead.
I don't have a copy. I don't have it.
Are you not allowed to have a copy of it?
I don't know, when these rules were made, you get me? When the rules were made, to close the door, shut the door, and that's it.
Secret.
Well, it was a class higher than secret. The doors were shut. That meant that whatever I had in my files, or what everyone else had, all was gathered together and was done. And a lot of it was then burned and destroyed.
And this is for a project that never actually flew.
That's true.
45 odd years ago.
That's true.
How do you explain that? It's an intriguing story. What I find particularly fascinating is that some aspects of Widmer's design don't seem too far away from a black world project that many people are talking about right now. Ask officially and everyone will deny it, but the strong rumor is that America already has a plane in the skies to replace Blackbird. It's called Aurora and goes faster and higher than its predecessor. So I'm here to talk to a congressman who's been asking awkward questions about it on Capitol Hill. Do you know whether Aurora exists?
I have it has not been verified to me through legitimate channels that the Aurora exists. And thus, if it does exist, I have not been able to find out the information about the project that I would need to know as chairman of the Space Subcommittee that would enable me to see that technologies that were developed for the Aurora could be part of our calculations as to how much should go into the budget, into our space budget.
You wrote to President Clinton requesting declassification of the black budget.
The only word back that I received from the president was a letter acknowledging my letter, and we haven't received a letter answering my specific request about releasing information about black programs, especially about Aurora, if it exists.
Are you yourself a believer in Aurora?
Well, if I had to bet the mortgage, I would probably come down on the side of saying there is an Aurora and that there's something out there that was developed in the latter years of the Cold War that uses some kind of a scramjet or ramjet that goes to 6 to 8 times the speed of sound and probably unmanned, made with the latest materials and technology and engines and craft. I would think there is, because there's been too many sightings and too many people who are reliable sources that what they've seen is inexplicable except for that.
I too share Congressman Rohrabacher's hunch that something has been developed. Blackbird had been flying for at least 3 years before anyone admitted its existence. In Aurora's case, it would certainly explain where some of the Pentagon's missing billions have gone. All over America, there are people who are picking away at the secrets of the black world. I'd heard about one of them, a guy called Steve Douglas in Amarillo, Texas, who even claimed to have seen something that could have been Aurora.
Well, it happened on a spring day here a few years ago. I was in my office monitoring military traffic, just like I always do, when I heard some unusual traffic, and then a huge roar and rumble, like the sky splitting apart, shaking the house. You could actually feel this rumble in your chest. So I went outside to see what was making the commotion, and here came this aircraft at breakneck speed flying from southwest to northeast right over the town. Well, I grabbed my camera, and by the time I got back out there, of course the aircraft was gone because it was flying so fast. But it left this unique contrail, this spotted string of pearls like a donuts on a rope right across the sky. So I shot some pictures of the contrail.
In itself, the contrail doesn't add up to evidence of Aurora's existence. As with everything you discover on the fringes of the black world and the white, it's a question of putting small pieces into a larger jigsaw. Douglas is determined to find rational explanations for what other people simply call UFOs, but my instinct tells me there's much more to it than this.
I think the security managers have been actively encouraging flying saucer reports about sightings around their facility. Because if everybody thinks you have people just out there seeing flying saucers, it makes it a lot easier to hide highly classified aircraft.
I'd spoken to John Pike before I left Washington. He's been making the connection between UFO sightings and top-secret aircraft for years.
a lot of the reconnaissance balloons that the Central Intelligence Agency was flying back in the 1950s and high-flying aircraft in the early 1960s, according to a CIA study, accounted for a lot of flying saucer reports back then. When you look up in the sky, the question of whether you see a high-flying aircraft or whether you see a flying saucer may just depend on what you saw on television the previous night.
Much of me agreed, but I needed the other side of the story, a story I'd never investigated before because it had always seemed two-way out. Someone had pointed me towards Jim Mars, an authority on UFOs and conspiracies.
In the military mind, the UFOs would represent advanced technology. And of course, to them, advanced technology then represents potential weaponry. And therefore, they've got to keep it all secret. You got to keep it secret from your enemies, and then you got to keep it secret from your own people so that your enemies don't get it, etc., etc.
Is the UFO phenomenon about alien beings, or is there an earthly dimension to it as well?
Well, that's the real question, isn't it? I'm often asked, do UFOs represent spaceship from another planet, or do they come from another dimension? Or do they come from another time? Or are they simply advanced technology being tested by our governments? And I would tell you that the answer is yes. All of the above.
It's dead easy to dismiss a lot of these people as cranky or deluded, but the one thing I've learned after years in the business is never to dismiss something as impossible simply because you can't imagine it happening. Time was when traveling in space was laughed off as fiction, but it happened sure enough, and much of it was developed here at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. NASA is still the place where dreams come true. Some people call it the white face of the black world. There's probably more money pumping through this one NASA facility than there is through the entire British aerospace scientific establishment. And this is what I find incredible about America, is that you can get so much technology concentrated in one place, but you also realize that the stuff is everywhere. It's across the entire country.
Monitors are reporting that the spacecraft is go for launch.
Hydraulics go. SSC, hydraulics internal.
T-minus 15 seconds and counting.
Rocket launches at Cape Kennedy are what the public see,
10, 9,
but I wanted to get inside the heads of the dream makers.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and we have liftoff of NASA's Mars Climate Orbiter as we continue to explore the mysteries of the red planet. View from the second stage of the Boeing Delta II vehicle as we continue to rise 20 seconds after liftoff. Everything continues to go well. Everything continues.
There's an awful lot goes on here. A lot of it is current science, stuff that's happening here and now, essentially rocket technology, things that really haven't changed too much since World War II. But there's also an awful lot which is way, way out Tomorrowland. And one or two people I hope to be speaking to here should have a very insightful view into the future, and we're probably talking decades, if not hundreds of years out in terms of space travel.
Wonderful view of the Earth's limb as we rise above the Earth's surface with our Mars Climate Orbiter.
What I really wanted to know was, were there revolutionary forms of propulsion available that would explain the otherwise impossible?
The nearest star, Alpha Centauri, is 4 light years away. We're looking at, already today, breakthrough physics, physical phenomena that has not been proven yet that will be required to make a fast trip to the Alpha Centauri system. Antimatter-driven fusion drives, space warp, the ways to get to other stars in a Star Trek type fashion. If we're not thinking about that kind of stuff today, we won't be going to the stars in 100 years. I guarantee it. Just like I can guarantee, because we didn't start looking at the technology to go to Mars back during the Apollo era, we're not there today. And if we had been thinking about that at the close of that era, we would be there and have it colonized today.
So we need to be thinking about it now.
Absolutely.
It may seem a long way from secret aircraft, but the inspiration for what NASA is doing is driven by the same impulse: to turn dreams into reality. One person I met even talked seriously about beating the speed of light by bending space, in effect to bring the stars closer to us. It's called traveling through a wormhole.
We're used to dealing with space in 3 dimensions. You get from point A to point B, you follow a straight line. A wormhole is based on the idea that you can actually curve space. That, gravity, Einstein discovered that gravity actually curves large masses curve space. Well, the same thing goes with a wormhole. Basically, you're curving and distorting space so you don't have to follow the normal dimensions. Sort of go up and out into a 4th dimension, if you will. And that allows you to go beyond and go much faster, effectively, than the speed of light. The speed of light, is something that pertains to the 3 dimensions, the space that we deal with day to day. But it allows you to get out of that space and go above that, up and out, so to speak.
So it does offer the possibility of crossing the universe.
Yeah, if you can build a wormhole, certainly. Yeah, you probably, who knows? But you got to be careful to make sure that you have the right endpoint. Who knows where you'll end up if you just generate it. You could end up anywhere in the universe. So that's something to be very careful about.
Hearing someone talk this way, I knew the detour to NASA hadn't been a waste. Though they say this stuff is way in the future, just how far away is anyone's guess. Maybe in the black world, some of it was a lot closer to reality than anyone at NASA believed, or cared to admit. I've always been extremely excited by this landscape. It's the sort of landscape that allows you to believe that anything is possible. I look up into that big old sky and that enormous horizon. Because there is absolutely nothing like it where I come from, it does fill you with this sort of strange belief that anything is possible out here. And it's sort of reflected in the people that I speak to, because when you're out in somewhere like New Mexico, in this landscape, there's a look in their eyes that kind of says, yes, anything is possible out here in a technology sense. And maybe the two feed off each other, I don't know. Maybe the landscape inspires the engineers who do these things to go out there and do extraordinary things, but I definitely get the impression that anything is possible in this place.
I think that New Mexico is an important state for UFO sightings for a variety of reasons, but one primarily, at least in the paranormal level, has to do with that act of magic we committed in 1945 by detonating an atomic bomb. It just seems as if that atomic blast acted as a magnet for all sorts of strange phenomena.
New Mexico is full of people like Charlie Bates. He and his wife are the foot soldiers of the UFO movement.
To be a UFO investigator for me means to be on the forefront of what is possibly the most important discovery of the end of this millennium. And that is one of several possibilities that we're being visited by extraterrestrial beings, that we're possibly being confronting beings from maybe another dimension, perhaps our own future. We really don't know, and that's the beauty of it. And that's what makes this such an appealing job.
And for me, part of it is confronting my own, sometimes it's too much of a willingness to believe everything I hear. So I'm trying, this is a good experience for me to learn to be more skeptical, really, and more selective in what I'm ready to believe. But another beauty of it for me is not only finding out more of what's out there. It seems that the more we find out, the more that's found out, the more questions there are. So that's the beauty of it and the frustration of it.
While the Bates erred towards the paranormal, I was still firmly in the skeptics camp. Perhaps the person who took me closest to believing in things I'd normally have thought were impossible was Boyd Bushman. He is a senior scientist for Lockheed Martin, the world's biggest defense contractor. In the quest for breakthroughs in aircraft propulsion, it was Bushman's job to think beyond the frontiers of what is known and understood. Doing what he did, I strongly suspected that he lived on the fringes of the black world. Perhaps nervous of what he could and couldn't say, he certainly seemed to talk in riddles.
I believe that nature does not speak English. What nature tells us is what must be honored. It has been talking to us in many domains, and we have data sets that we're still trying to understand. But I can't talk to all the theoreticians because there don't exist theories where I am. What we have is wonderful, and it comes from miracles occurring. But that we will see will not be what we have. And I therefore tell my team, if you know anything, I really don't want to talk to you, because everything we know has already gone to production. Now, if there's something you kind of wonder, if you think of, etc., let's take those steps to the future. And that's what we always have to do, is walk literally. Kind of a lonely walk, but a very, very rewarding walk, to listen where languages are not taught and verbalization is not used, but we have to learn its language.
I felt he was trying to tell me something he wasn't allowed to talk about. So I asked him about the holy grail of science fiction, anti-gravity propulsion.
I do notice in recent publications that one of the latest group of my colleagues have said that they have evidence, because of the separation of the galaxies, that there is an anti-gravity. I went back to some of the first work on gravity done by Galileo, and he climbed his Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropped 2 stones. They arrived at the ground at the same time. I climbed my Leaning Tower of Building 500 here at the company, and I dropped my 2 weights that were exactly the same weight, and they did not arrive at the ground at the same time. I had purposely placed opposing magnets that didn't like each other, like two norths together. And I had already done an iron filing test that showed that it was showering out an entire magnetic plane. And I wanted to see how that magnetic plane interfaced with gravity.
He showed me a film of extraordinary experiments that had been done in Canada 10 years ago. A scientist there appeared to have found a way of getting objects to defy gravity by beaming different energy waves at them. Most people had written it off as a conjuring trick, but Bushman took it seriously and was trying to develop his own techniques.
I'm refining and heading towards something that all you have to do is charge, and it is lifting up. It is losing weight. When we complete the technology, it should fly.
I was astounded that someone of Bushman's standing should seriously discuss the notion of anti-gravity with me. His experimental work opened up a world of possibilities that for me has made the unbelievable believable.
Small fireballs, large fireballs, discs, triangles, 300-foot flying rectangles, formations of glowing orbs, stuff that blinks out and blinks back in. It seems to render itself invisible.
Yellow spherical object, large dark object, triangular, blot out the stars. No sound whatsoever.
I'm now heading towards southern Colorado, and the reason I'm going up there is that there have been a lot of sightings reports of strange objects in the sky. Now, until this point, you know, I really was heading up there with all the skepticism that someone who has heard about flying saucers and the like and really doesn't want to believe them can muster. I mean, I was and still am reticent, but the exciting thing now is that thanks to Boyd Bushman at Lockheed Martin, you know, I can actually dare to believe that there might be some very down-to-earth explanation for what one commonly perceives as UFOs. It's hard even to say the word sometimes, UFO, because it sounds very strange. But anyway, that's why we're heading to southern Colorado to experience some of the weirdness that people say is going on up there. The first guy with a strange story I met in Colorado was Ken Fry.
And there was a light off in the western horizon that looked like the object was maybe several hundred feet high. At first I thought it might have been a planet such as Venus, and then I thought, well, it's kind of a light orange or yellow color. So I stopped and looked at it for a few minutes. I pulled over and it started moving, kind of hovering, and then I drove down the highway a little further, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. And then about 5 seconds later, I saw something maybe 200 feet above Del Norte. It was an object, a dark object. I could see some small lights on the underside of it, and but there was no noise because I turned over and turned off my engine, and there was absolutely no noise and just very few lights. It appeared to be a fairly large object. I couldn't tell if it was triangular shaped or square or round, but
how could you tell it was large?
Just seems like by the stars. I looked up and couldn't see any stars.
So it obscured the stars. You got a kind of an image of a silhouette.
Right.
was just the start of it. Everyone I spoke to had a story to tell. David Perkins had been researching the sightings for 25 years.
Where we live, it's just a continuous barrage. This is southern Colorado we're talking about, of strange craft being reported by people that are reputable observers, many of them ex-military observers. A friend of mine, a colleague, works for the Defense Department. He has a contract to do advanced research for them, so he's a very reputable fellow. One day he was out jogging and went over a little hill and looked down below him at a large pasture that was down there, and he saw a craft that was hovering just above the ground, he said, and he told me that it was a mile long, hovering there, and you could see clearly the outlines of windows. It was a large metallic craft, totally silent. He stared at it a while, became frightened, and ran back into town, immediately called NORAD, and said, could you please tell me what is a mile long that's hovering in the pasture outside of town? And they, of course, said, we have no idea what you're talking about.
NORAD being North American Air Defense Command.
Right. And I thought that was a very interesting and reputable report, because obviously he had a lot to lose by giving crackpot reports if he's working for the Defense Department. And that isn't the only report of craft that size. I've had several other incidents where people have described mile-long craft, or half-mile-long craft, or quarter-mile-long craft flying incredibly low, with all kinds of flashing lights and lights going around the rims in sequencing fashion. So we've seen some amazingly large, we've had reports of amazingly large craft all over the area.
I might have discounted stories like these, except I was hearing them all over the place. But the thing everyone was really talking about were mysterious cattle mutilations. At first sight they seemed irrelevant, but the frequency of the stories and the fact they always seemed to be associated with UFO sightings meant that I couldn't ignore them. So I went to see Chris O'Brien, a resident expert on the subject.
I investigated a case, just your average rancher, average ranching family in the middle of nowhere. They literally had no trees, no places to hide, nothing for a mile all the way around them. One road in, one road out. Rancher gets up in the morning, over his cup of coffee, looks out, and 30 feet from his house is a mutilated cow. Now, if I was that rancher, I would immediately go into a place of fear. I would think, hey, whoever it was could have come in here and done this to me or my family. And one of the things I think is really important and possibly crucial, and maybe our biggest clue, is that the animals are left where they're found. If somebody is cutting up and taking body parts, they could just take the whole animal away and no one would ever know. It would be just a missing, head of livestock. But they leave them there, and that to me tells me and other investigators that a signal is being sent. I don't think I know quite yet what that signal is, but I can tell you that it has to do with fear, with control, and with the elements that tend to keep people in their place.
Who is supposed to be keeping us in our place is not clear. Chris doesn't pretend to have any answers, but he showed me some video to back up his point.
Predators have obviously torn this animal up, but there's unusual cookie cutter incisions. Go ahead, tell me that coyotes did that. And this animal appears to have been cookie cutter incised all the way from the chin, all the way down the belly to the rear end. There's no question in my mind that that is not tearing and ripping action from coyote. It can't be. It looks like the thing was sewn together and then you pulled the sewing out. Now, I've never seen this before, but correct me if I'm wrong. Do predators pop the hoof material off the feet? I've never seen that before. I've never heard of that.
Chris O'Brien told me about a rancher who'd had a direct experience of a strange visitation.
Gone to bed about 10 o'clock that night, and for some reason around 10:30
I felt that there was something wasn't right. Went out of the front porch of the house, and very surprised to find a helicopter hovering just over the very top of the house. As I come out and tried to discern why a helicopter was over our house, I became aware of the fact that it wasn't making any noise. The only reason that I knew a helicopter was over our house was the beating of the rotors and the down pressure of the air from a helicopter blade.
So it was there was downwash and it was beating against the trees, and you were conscious that this helicopter was close?
Yeah, I knew that it was barely over the house because I'd had some time at an air station during the time that I was in the Coast Guard, about 9 months, where I was on flight crews and search and rescue crews, where I was around a helicopter a lot. And for the particular downwash and down pressure that I was getting and experiencing, I knew that the helicopter was just over us, just hovering over the top of the house. And I could also see the bushes and the branches and the trees with a lot of sway with the beat of the helicopter blade.
On an otherwise perfectly still night?
Very cold, very still.
And this helicopter was not making any noise?
I know that it wasn't making any noise because I was trying to discern whether it was a turbine helicopter or a mechanical helicopter, to see if I could hear the turbine whine or the pistons on a mechanical helicopter, because I was very familiar with turbine helicopters, and it was just very, very strange.
Nothing?
Nothing. No sound. Possibly the sound of the wind moving violently from the rotors, but that's all. No other sound.
The next morning, John Haar and his sons made an unsettling discovery in a field behind the house.
We found, first of all, a dead cow that had apparently died in her sleep. She was in a sleeping position, had never moved, with no apparent cause of death. And then we found a cow on her side that we just thought was dead at first. And as we looked more closely, my wife noticed that the cow had been mutilated, that the skin on the jawline of the cow had been precisely removed, that all of the meat was taken off the bones, and the sex organs had been cut out very carefully of this cow. And no other apparent cause of death, but it had been obviously mutilated. And as I studied it and looked at it, it became more obvious to me all the time that this was something that was too precise and too fine to have been done with less than a surgeon's scalpel. I'm angry. I wish if they wanted to kill cows, they'd kill their own cattle. I wish it wasn't mine. I don't know who they are, but they are powerful enough and have enough money to have helicopters that can apparently stun cattle as they sleep in the ground and run silently. Maybe it's Big Brother, I don't know. My wife's not here today during this interview because of the fear that she feels it might bring upon us, but I'm not afraid of it.
And how does that fear sort of articulate itself? What do people, your wife, think is going to happen or could happen?
Well, she believes that I may be stepping into something bigger than what we're capable of handling ourselves, which is very possible. If there's some sort of, I don't know, plot or whatever that, it's beyond my understanding. I don't know. It's bigger than what we are. I don't know why someone would do this, but if they're ruthless enough to kill cattle, what are they going to kill our children next?
Things had suddenly taken a sinister turn. Some people wanted to believe that extraterrestrials were responsible. Others that it was the work of the government. Either notion was pretty hard to get my head around. I felt I had entered a looking-glass world. In the midst of this madness, I wanted to know if David Perkins had come to any conclusions.
Just from my own background and research into this over 25 years, I find it hard to believe that anybody knows what's going on, because we're seeing something that's creating supposedly, apparently, real physical events in the environment. Cattle mutilations, landing traces, crop circles, if you will, any number of other things. We have just that tangential sort of piece of evidence that would suggest something but is not conclusive to the scientific community. From my own point of view, it doesn't satisfy my curiosity as to what is actually behind the phenomenon. I suspect it's a much bigger picture than extraterrestrials even. To me, that seems like a simplistic answer. That it doesn't really satisfy my criteria for answering all the questions that surround, for instance, a cattle mutilation. I can't throw out half of the evidence, as most people do, to satisfy their pet theory. Most of my colleagues say, okay, it's got to be extraterrestrials because people saw flying saucers. Some people saw cows being lifted in beams of light into craft. Well, that's all very fine, but what about these the Bigfoot that's running around in the field, or these strange cryptozoological creatures that people report around these incidents, and the haunted houses that the people live in who own the cows? And I mean, I find it hard to believe that aliens are, involved in our lives to the degree that they're hiding our toothbrushes at night and stuff like this. I think there's got to be some other explanation. From my point of view and my own research after all this time, I tend to feel it's a reflective phenomenon. That somehow it's emanating from humans, emanating from the Earth, somehow part of our existence here rather than something that's coming from above and beyond.
It's very difficult to know what is going on in this place. There are loads of reports of unconventional aircraft, and there are equally mysterious and somewhat chilling reports of cattle mutilations. Now, the people seem to have reached a conclusion that these two events go hand in hand. That may well be. I'd say the overriding impression I come away with here is that people want answers and that they are afraid. And you can't help but soak up that kind of an atmosphere.
My experience, though, has indicated that most of the rank and file people in government and in the American military have simply not been clued into what is really going on. I feel that the definite knowledge that the United States government holds is in the hands of a very select few people. And I think in order to keep that information out of other hands, they resort to classification, denial, and disinformation.